All right, welcome everyone. That was Regina Spektor with the songs Samson and Fidelity. Two of my favorites for sure. I love her so very much. So let's go through the lyrics and see what we see. So the first song, Samson, for those of you who are aware of the biblical story or not, I'll just briefly explain it. So the story of Samson and Delilah, this is kind of sung from the perspective of Delilah, and she, through the tale, she cut Samson's hair. He was the strongest man out there, the fiercest warrior, and they fell in love, and she ends up cutting his hair, and he loses all of his strength, and so he's unable to break free from the bonds that he's put in. They lock him up, but then his hair grows back, and he's eventually able to break down the space and bring the temple down where all this corruption was. So this song is sung from an interesting perspective, taking on that story, but then adding a sweetness to it, sweetness to the fall. And to me, it's just a beautiful reminder that even in the fall, there's love. Even in the fall, there's purpose, there's meaning. And that's what's sung about here. So you are my sweetest downfall. Our fall into duality, right? Like when we picked up or we decided to pretend to be separate. Why did we do that? Well, one of the reasons is to deepen our connection with love. How can I love more deeply when I don't experience the absence of that? Or how can I love more deeply if there's nothing, if there's not that longing or that sense of separation to fall in love with? This is the greatest love story ever told. So it's all about that. And so you are my sweetest downfall is in us choosing to manifest ourselves into infinite variations, especially in the masculine and feminine form, all to complete this love story and go through it again and again and again and deepen our connection with love itself. So I loved you first. So again, hinting at this initial split, the fall into duality. Beneath the sheets of paper lies my truth. I have to go. Your hair was long when we first met. So your hair was long as in we weren't immersed in the duality. We weren't perceiving ourselves as separate. We had the infinite strength of ourselves. But it says I have to go as in we have to, in order to deepen our connection, we have to go through this fall. And it's not a bad thing. Falls are not a bad thing. They're simply a necessary part of the experience to, as I said, deepen that connection with love. So Samson went back to bed, not much hair left on his head. So the left hand path, the falling path, we lose our connection. Your hair represents your connection in a lot of ways. It's a sensor. It's tied to spiritual growth in a lot of different ways. So not much hair left on his head. He ate a slice of Wonder Bread and went right back to bed. So eating ourselves, just sort of painting the picture of the fall. We fall into eating all sorts of things, and Wonder Bread being very dense and heavy and processed and, all that. So this is representing our fallen states. And the history books forgot about us, and the Bible didn't mention us. So as in we lost our heroic role. We lost the story. The history books didn't write about us because we fell out of that layer of the story. And again, there's purpose because you can't have a hero's journey without the hero having come from a fallen state. That's why all movies that sort of describe or books or whatever describe the whole hero's journey, they often start with the fallen state or some tragedy at the beginning, and then it's the rise up from that. And the Bible didn't mention us, not even once, because we were staying in that. But still, you are my sweetest downfall. I loved you first. This experience of moving into duality to manifest a partner, the other. How beautiful that is that. I mean, it's such a magnificent experience. And even though there is heartbreak and sadness and pain and suffering and all of those things, they're all necessary because they give us such a contrasting experience for the wonderment and that deepest and truest expression of love. Beneath the stars came falling on our heads, but they're just all light. They're just all light. So that's the scientific viewpoint, that stars are far off distant burning balls of gas, and we might not even see them anymore because they're so far away. The light still is reaching us, and all the nonsense that they talk about. And so this is just presenting that fallen form, believing in the scientific viewpoint of nature and this earth and the stars. So again, just showing the fallen state. Your hair was long when we first met. Samson came to my bed, told me that my hair was red. So again, pointing to the fallen state, the red, the lowest chakra, the beginning point. We have to fall down to that level in order to rise back up again. So she represents that. Told me I was beautiful and came into my bed. So we together to get her, we have to meet her first. And then through this reunification, it's the beautiful love story that unfolds. Oh, I cut his hair myself one night, a pair of dull scissors in the yellow light. So again, pointing to the chakras and rising up again, a pair of dull scissors in the yellow light, red and then yellow. And he told me that I'd done all right and kissed me till the morning light, and he kissed me till the morning light. So I would see that coming back to the heart, the green. So this is like a transformational process of falling down to the red and coming back up. Samson went back to bed, not much hair left on his head. He ate a slice of Wonder Bread and went back to bed. Oh, we couldn't bring the columns down. We couldn't destroy a single one. And the history books forgot about us, and the Bible didn't mention us, not even once. Because we're still in that lower form. We're in that lower state. But it is, you are my sweetest downfall. I loved you first. So it's just painting it in, instead of this, this dark and dismal falling into hell. It's like, no, even through those experiences, there's love, and there's that beautiful expression and what can be found through it. So I really love that. This representation of that story. And this is easily my favorite song of hers. Just so beautiful and how she sings it. So that's Samson, the first song I played. And then the next one, Fidelity. So she starts with Shake It Up. Shake out of our stagnation, out of the lower form. Even though that song was a beautiful representation of that fallen form, it's there for us to move out of, move out of the fear. So shake it up, move, don't be stagnant. And then it presents this, still someone who's in kind of a split reality, navigating between love and fear. So I never loved nobody fully, always one foot on the ground, always by protecting my heart truly, I got lost in the sounds. So when we're in that headspace, protecting our heart, while necessary at times, it can lead to us being closed off and disconnected. So when that happens, we do get lost in the sounds. The sounds I hear in my mind, all of these voices I hear in my mind, all of these words, the ego, the egoic conversation, the spinning, spiraling thoughts. I hear in my mind all of this music, and it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. The sadness and suffering that we can fall into. So suppose I never ever met you. Suppose we never fell in love. So suppose I never ever let you kiss me so sweet and so soft. So it's like reflecting on the previous song of the being the sweetest downfall, but now we're like stuck in the muck, seemingly, for the time that it takes. So it's like describing this period. And sometimes we look back and think, why did we do this? I mean, I'm sure we laugh at it at times. I like to imagine just the decision we made at some point where we chose to dive into this experience and forget everything about who we were. And I like to just imagine this conversation with ourselves where we're like, are we sure we want to do that again? Do we remember what happened last time? Do you remember how intense the pain felt and how cruel we were to each other? And then somebody else chimes in and it's you also. And they're like, yeah, but remember how beautiful it was? Remember all the amazing wonderment that came from those love stories and how we were able to fall in love so many times in so many ways and create such beautiful things. And it's like, yeah, I remember that too. And so, at some point we decide to dive back in again. But this is presenting this doubt of like, why do we do this to ourselves? Suppose I never ever saw you. Suppose you never ever called. Suppose I kept on singing love songs just to break my own fall. As in not allowing the transformational eucatastrophe breaking point to happen. We like numb ourselves. Suppose I kept on singing love songs just to break my own fall. Like we're not allowing that transformational process to turn around. Just to break my fall. All my friends say that of course it's going to get better. So our angelic guides, the knowing deep within that it is going to get better, this too shall pass, yet we're in kind of a space of doubt in this song. So it repeats, I never loved nobody fully, always one foot on the ground, and by protecting my heart truly, I got lost in the sounds. Again, the fallen state of getting trapped in the mind. So I hear in my mind all these voices, I hear in my mind all these words, I hear in my mind all this music, and it breaks my heart. And she even sings the song, breaks my heart. It's like the heart beating, this transformational sense that it can bring. But it breaks our heart to be in that fallen state, but it's necessary to have the heart break open sometimes so that it can learn to love more deeply. So that's what this song really represents, to me at least. And look, it's 3:51 right now. How about that? So yeah, thank you for listening to one of my absolute favorite artists. And I learned about her from my second girlfriend, and really the one who I like, probably the first. I mean, of course, I loved the first girlfriend, but it wasn't as deep of a connection as the second one. And so this album, Begin to Hope, from Regina Spektor, is very, very powerful for me because it brings up a lot of memories, and I just love it every time. I have had the privilege of seeing her, and she's just adorable. She's adorable and just full of love and joy, and she loves to spread it. So highly recommend checking her out further if you like. But yeah, thanks for being here today. This is we are Wednesday, September 10th, 2025 by some standards. And we're here for another Quest-i-on, where we gather together to go on a quest or a series of quests. And the questions that we ask are what guide us. And so by having that willingness to come forward and ask questions, or even just share experiences or go over things that might be unclear, or even things that are clear and you just want to share, all these topics are completely on topic for this show. This is just a gathering for us to go over all things, because it is all connected. So there's nothing that's off limits. Everything is welcome. And yeah, just to go over some quick announcements for today. Just a reminder that this weekend on Sunday, September 14th will be the Foxhole event in Wrightsville, Pennsylvania. So excited for that. Just to inform everyone, it is sold out, but we will be live streaming the event. So I don't know how well it's going to turn out. I'm hoping that it's going to come through okay. It's just going to be on my phone, and it's going to be on YouTube. So I posted the link the other day about that. So feel free to tune in. And if you do tune in, would be super helpful if anyone is there in the live chat to just give us any feedback on the sound quality, the video quality, if things can't be seen or heard, and we'll do our best to make adjustments. I'm gonna have lots of other things on my mind, but Darth is gonna be there to help manage the live stream, and I'll be doing my best to monitor the chat for any feedback. So if you are tuning in and listening to that, that's a great help to just give any feedback. So really appreciate that for sure. It's going to be a great event. I'm really excited. It's all coming together quite well. I'll be one of the speakers there. SG Anon will be another speaker there. And then we have a great lineup of other speakers as well, just to give a little five or so minutes on how to make the world a better place, which, as we talk about that quite extensively here. I haven't even written my talk, and I don't think I'm going to write it out explicitly, but I've got a pretty good idea on what I'm going to go over. So yeah, that's coming up on Sunday. So definitely tune in to that on the live stream if you like. There will be a recording there, and I can't guarantee this, but if anyone is interested in bidding on auction items online, we might have a way to do that. So if we do get that set up, that will also be described in the YouTube comment section, or the YouTube chat section. I'll pin a comment at the top that will describe that. So if that's something of interest of you to give a donation, but also bid on an auction item, might be an option, but I can't promise that just yet. So yeah, that's that coming up on Sunday. And then just a reminder that I am 100% donation supported to do all that I do. And if you'd like to help chip in for my costs that come up, then here's my contribution page, justincarpenter.org/contribute. Really appreciate anyone who does consider helping with that. Any amount is extremely helpful. I live very simply, and so every little bit goes a long way. So I appreciate anyone who does consider that. And yeah, and if I get it, finances are challenging for so many right now. So if finances are not an option, there are other ways that you can help. The easiest way is just simply sharing the work, sharing it on wherever pages you find, or even just giving a like on a YouTube page or on Telegram or wherever. That just helps to get the message out a little bit further. So thank you for helping with that. And then there are other ways that you can help out too, if you feel like writing notes or timestamps for these longer shows, or or making short videos or anything in that capacity. Just feel free to reach out, and I'm sure we can find something to help out. So yeah, that's that. And then just a reminder that I am still supporting Bali and the Lions of Uganda Children's Ministry over in Uganda. So any contribution is greatly appreciated to help them out as well. If I think the Gifts and Go page has become deactivated. Let me check right now, actually. Oh, no, it's still up. Okay. Yeah, I have to keep reactivating this every so often. Oh, thanks, Judy. Thanks for giving some there. Yeah, it goes inactive if it hasn't received any donations for some time. But thanks, Judy, for bringing that back up. So yeah, you can donate here to this page, and that will go to them. And then if you have other ways that you want to pay outside of Gifts and Go, you can always send through me any ways that you contribute to me, and just write a note and I will make sure it gets to them. So I appreciate the consideration there. And yeah, I think that's about it for opening announcements. So just to go over sort of like current events today, as we do sometimes, just wanted to first say, I just saw the footage of Charlie Kirk, who seems like he's been shot. The video, I saw is pretty brutal of him getting shot in the neck. I'm praying that this was a white hat staged operation. I really do hope so. Because if it's not, it really doesn't look good for him. So of course miracles happen, and I don't know any which way. I don't know exactly what has happened within this. But whether it's staged or not, looks like Charlie Kirk might be stepping away. And so with whatever's happening, just sending prayers to his family and everyone involved. And yeah, he's been a powerful voice in getting truth out there. And I just want to, so whether this was staged or not, it still sends the same message that the tension is growing within everywhere, really, all over the world. The tension is growing. The tension is rising. And as we've talked about before, it's only going to keep rising until that breaking point. So just to stress the importance of being cautious of who you're speaking with and what you are wearing, and know your audience, know who you're around. Because as these tensions continue to rise, whether this event was staged or not, I don't know. But it still represents the danger that can happen. And Charlie was very brave in going into college campuses and doing these kind of things, but he did speak on a lot of very inflammatory topics. You know, it shouldn't be inflammatory, but given the state and the tension of reality, they are quite that. So he bravely stepped up to speak on these things and bring light to it, and take that, be that, accept the target that comes with that. So I just want to urge caution for anyone of like, know what you're doing and know who you're around when you speak about things. I personally am very, I don't wear like Trump paraphernalia out, and those kind of things just because of the trigger state of people. So I think it's a good reminder for us all to take caution and know that these tensions will continue to rise. And so there's no need to try and prove to somebody even if they're going completely the wrong way. People are learning in their own way, in the ways that they need to. So it's not our job to prove it to anybody So I just want to put that out there again, just to urge caution in that space. So, thanks for hearing me there. And then another news item was the video of the seemingly fatal stabbing of the Ukrainian woman on the train. And that one, there's a lot more evidence that was staged. So I'm quite confident that was a white hat operation to stage that. And even just the factors around it of, a repeat offender, violent criminal let loose to show like the importance of why we shouldn't be doing that, and why these left-leaning judges and things have created this environment where violent criminals are able to roam freely and hurt people. So I do think that one was staged, especially given the fact that she was Ukrainian. So it just gives the sort of liberal mindset a challenging thing to wrap around, of like, do I support her as a victim because she's Ukrainian, or do I say that she, or do I just keep toting this narrative that just because, he was black or whatever, that I'm supposed to be woke minded and defend his actions, or even just turn a blind eye to it. So it's giving a lot of good conversation to the forefront. And like I said, there's more evidence showing that one was staged. I don't know for certain, but there's plenty to show that her name has been used before through other events. So it's like, and even just the footage of just like where was the blood all around her, and it was dripping from his knife. So to me, it looks like a prop. a staged event, just to drive that conversation into the news. So yeah, but either way, it still is drawing attention to heightened tensions and just being mindful. So we're having like this two-front way where Trump is like publicly saying we need to be cleaning up this kind of stuff in our cities, especially the ones that are ridden with crime. And at the same time, tension is rising. So while a lot of these events and things are staged, it's important to know that people's reactions to these things are very real. And so just because something is not real as far as what's shown on TV doesn't mean that real things can't happen and real violence doesn't occur. So just be cautious on where you are and who you're around. And especially if you're in a city scenario, it does sound like DC has gotten tons better since that very quick cleanup. And I imagine that will still continue happening in the foreseeable future, as it seems to be that's what's shifting and warming up people to recognizing that it was necessary for the military to step in, and they have stepped in, and they've been stepping in for quite some time, but it's just a slow rollout to warm people up to that idea. So not to say or indicate anything as far as the timeline goes, I don't know what the timeline is, but I do sort of get the sense that we are, it's going to take some more time. I don't know how long that is, whether that's just through this next season or for another year or two. I don't know, but I'd say it's important to maintain a sense of no expectation for this timeline and trust that those who are making these decisions are doing it for the best and optimal route for us all to move through. And we have the fortunate and perhaps at times unfortunate role of having foresight and insight into what's going on. And that can lead to impatience. It can lead to expectations and all of that. So just trust the plan, trust it's moving in the ways that it needs to. And yeah, so just a little update there. So yeah, we'll go ahead and dive into the show today. And like I've said before, I love to prioritize questions from people who are live here on the show, or topics or things just to bring forward. So if you find yourself having any topic that you'd like to cover or a question you want to ask, just hit that center button on your screen and that will signal to me to open up your mic and you can jump in with your question. I do have some written questions that we can go over, but like I said, I love to prioritize people that are here. So with that, I will just give a quick pause and see if anyone wants to jump in to start us off. Hi, Danielle. Go ahead. Danielle, did you have something to jump in with? All right. We're not hearing anything if you're trying to speak, but it could have just been a mistake. No worries there. So with that, we'll shift to some written questions. So this one was from Philip Pirovano, and he said, "Can I talk more about the soul? How does our soul evolve during one lifetime and over multiple lifetimes? Do we bring trauma from one life to another? And should we identify these and try to heal them? Once we die, do we immediately go back into a new body on Earth? Can we speak with the souls of loved ones even when they have reincarnated? When have we reached the end so we don't incarnate anymore? Are new souls born? Etc., etc. Many questions. Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack with those. So we'll just go over that one at a time. So how does our soul evolve during one lifetime and over multiple lifetimes? So this is not something that I have I mean, there is a lot pointing to the evolutionary learning cycle of one soul over multiple lifetimes. Over a singular lifetime, it's easier to kind of wrap around of this. Yeah, like it's like the way that this creation is set up, these frequencies and vibrations that are vibrating at different rates to give the appearance of physicality, and also the energetic influence of the stars, the celestial bodies, and everyone here, all layers of consciousness. You are one of those, and we are all those layers of consciousness. So through that, it's like, I don't know how much even really conscious thought is put into decisions around a life's or a soul's journey, what they want to learn, but it's easier to conceptualize that way. So like the soul is the highest vantage point, your higher self. And as y'all know, I love the video game model, because say you're creating a character in an RPG, a role-playing game, which is kind of like what we're doing here in this experience. Before you start the game, you're selecting your character attributes, what they look like. And in some games, you're even choosing the major story arc that you're going to go down, the route that you might choose in that lifetime, in that way. So that's how I see it from a soul's perspective, is like we established a trajectory, a framework of how we wanted to live, how we wanted to experience. And it's hard to wrap around, but it's like we already know the ending, which is the culmination of all of these experiences coming together. But we're like working towards that ending, moving not backwards, but starting from a seemingly earlier point in the timeline, even though it's really all happening now. If that makes any sense. Again, it's hard to explain. So the soul is choosing to go through these major life events, and it might not even establish like exactly how that life event needs to show up, but just input it into the code that somehow this particular experience needs to be had. And then we incarnate and we begin this path. And the part of all of our journey is to release the ego, which is the default state, the autopilot, the dummy controls. Basically, it's like when we're not ready to be stepping into a fully conscious state, then the ego runs the show to keep our body alive. But if we allow the ego to continue running the show, then it's only fear driven and scarcity driven, that we have to fight for survival and all this other kind of stuff. So part of that soul's journey is to reclaim the experience from the ego and say, thank you for protecting me for this time. Thank you for providing adequate training, a training sparring partner, so that I can grow and prove my strength and move through these things. And it's a perpetual process. So it's not that like a one and done thing. So that's a big part of the soul's evolution, is like laying down as a lamb to surrender, to receive that divine inspiration, and then raising as the lion, which is that sovereign, powerful, Christic being that we are. We've just forgotten that, and we don't need anything. We don't need to add anything to ourselves. It's merely just peeling away layers of obscurity, of attachment, of things that we've assumed, so that we can step into that highest expression. So the soul might set the trajectory to learn those things. And I would say it complements the overarching soul's journey over multiple lifetimes, because if we want to call them past lives, which they're not really past, they're simultaneously happening now. But every band of your particular frequency, which you could call your soul, however that's expressing in whatever timeline, that's still you. And so you're experiencing that in that form and going through. And so in one lifetime, you might be the oppressor, and the other time you might be the victim. And you get to experience both. And that allows for the full dynamic experience of what it's like, what it's like to be that. So for a particular lifetime, it is sort of like a learning journey through these different lifetimes. But it's also all happening now. So the effects that my choices might have in this timeline are rippling out and affecting other timelines as well, changing the experiences that are brought my way. And that's only just for your particular frequency, like your resonance. So, if you look at it on like a Hertz scale, say my frequency is at, 525 Hertz or something like that, just throwing a random number out there. And so wherever that frequency shows up, it's like a familiar to me, because I'm already resonating in that frequency. And so then I can tap into that as my quote unquote past life, but it's not in the past. It's right here, right now. If that makes any sense. Again, it's hard to talk about. So that kind of sets up the framework for how we learn through these various experiences. And then but also part of the evolutionary process is the fall as well. The cycle is complete. It's the sine wave. It's the rising and the falling. So it's not always going back to singularity, back to union. Sometimes it's falling further into division. And both of those are necessary as far as learning. So for perhaps one soul's trajectory, or one lifetime's trajectory, it's actually to be the villain and to be that antichrist, a necessary antagonist for the story to even exist. And from that perspective, they seem like they are the protagonist, because that's how the story is set up from their relative point of view. Yeah. It's a lot. So he asked, do we bring trauma from one life to another, and should we identify these and try to heal them? Yes, I think it's very helpful to reflect on, where are my fears? Where do my triggers come up? And sometimes we can identify within one lifetime where these triggers have developed. And sometimes we can't. Some people are born with certain phobias and fears, and that's likely stemming from another life cycle where that experience happened to cause that scarring on our sort of form to appear in the form of trauma. So I want to be cautious. It's not that we have to be obsessive about figuring out, what were all my past lives and what were my traumas and all these different things. And because that can distract us from the here and now. But just be open to what you are led to. What do your meditations bring? How are you seeing? How are you showing up? And whomever we're encountering in our lives, these other bands of frequencies that are all you from various vantage points, how are they being magnetically attracted or repelled in my life? And for what reason? What can I learn from it? So just having that state of openness, all of those things will be revealed to you in time when we're ready. So I think there's some people get a little too carried away with like, I've got to go see all these, mystics that claim they can read past lives and figure out exactly what happened and, all of that, which I'm not saying that's wrong to do, but it can be a distraction. It can take us away from the here and now. And then, so just trust that those will be revealed in time, is my approach, at least. And then he asked, once we die, do we immediately go back into a new body on Earth? That depends. If we haven't learned much at all, if we haven't stepped into a state of awareness where we're even capable of making that choice, then I would say yes. You know, if we're following the evil path or the antichristic path, or even if we're just staying in a complacent, numbed out reality as a part of the masses, then yes, likely we will have no concept or wisdom or learning to even comprehend making a decision like that when we come to that point in time. And we'll see, Darth has talked about this too, when we're so accustomed to the physical experience and we're so attached to having those things, then by nature we will just merely manifest back into the physical space, because that's the request that we're making to creation. So we will pop in, but that doesn't mean that it has to always be the case like that. If we grow to a state of awareness, then I do feel like there is more of a choice given. You know, do we go back? How do we want to structure that life? And that's where I feel like these ascended masters, they have reached that stage where they are able to enter into specific timelines. Maybe they go through some veil of forgetfulness, but it's also quickly remembered as they step back into that form, that Christic form, to spread the message in that way. So that one depends. It depends on where you are, and nothing's wrong. It's not a trap. It's not a horrible thing. Some people describe this experience as like a soul trap and don't go to the light and all that kind of stuff. But there's no trap. It's just you. You might forget that you wanted to do this, but you're not trapped, and no one is trapping you. It's merely just there as a organized structure for how do we learn through, how do we move through it. Yeah, so it's a game to play. So can we speak with the souls of loved ones even when they have reincarnated? Yeah, so because their life from your eyes left a energetic signature in your consciousness, which is our consciousness, but the relative perception of that individual is different. So how I'm viewed, say by my sister, is different than how I'm viewed by my mother, is different than how I'm viewed by my friend, is different than how I'm viewed by, the person who hates me. So for each of these individuals, the Justin Carpenter energetic imprint is vastly different. But they can all connect to that. Even if I were to die physically, they could all reconnect to that energetic signature. So for the ones who love me, they would be able to tap into that love and experience that. And the ones who I was the enemy or they hated me, they could tap into that anger as well. And it's all me, but it's also not at the same time. So after somebody dies, of course we can connect with that anytime we want to, and it will remain our unique connection point to that soul. But it doesn't mean that it's exactly the same for everybody else. And it doesn't mean that that soul is just like waiting around for us to connect to. It's merely there as a band of consciousness for us to tune our radio dial to. And that band of consciousness, that radio dial is going to look a little bit different for us all, because we all have unique radio stations and unique perceptions of how we've gotten to that space. So you're always able to, and that's why there's no anyone who does die, like they're always with us. But it's not like they're waiting on the other side, like, I mean, in some ways they are, but they're also not. So their soul will reincarnate and has reincarnated and is incarnated infinitely over all the infinite timelines. So it would be impossible to think that by us connecting with that soul, those frequencies across infinite timelines, that we're isolating it and connecting only to that. We're connecting to whichever familiar layer we know and have the resonance for. And as we grow in awareness, then our ability to expand that ability to connect over more timelines or over even more perceptions and realities becomes available to us as we grow in awareness. So yeah, I'll just leave that one there. And then when we have reached the, oh, go ahead, Darth.
Hey, if I can just make a brief comment on past familial or ancestral trauma. It's if you don't mind if I back the conversation up a little bit.
Yeah, please. Yeah, go wherever you like. I was hoping you would.
All right, so there was this experiment where they were scientists, these researchers were studying nonlinear transplanted trauma, and what it is, it's when someone assumes trauma and it's not their own. So the way that they did this is they had a bunch of monkeys in a cage, right? And they would have bananas up high, and the monkeys, liking bananas, would automatically climb up the sides of the cages to get to the bananas. And what the researchers would do is they would douse the monkeys with a bucket of very unpleasant scented water. And the monkeys learned very quickly that they had to wait to be fed bananas. They couldn't climb up to get it, right? And eventually what the researchers did is they added one more monkey to the group. Now, this monkey had never been doused, right? But when he went to climb up the sides, the other monkeys jumped on top of him. He could, as soon as he went to get up there, they all jumped on him and they beat him up, right? And so he doesn't know why they're doing this, because he's never been doused and there's no way for them to communicate this. All he knows is that if he climbs up the sides, he gets beats up. So they take away a monkey and they add a new one, right? And this monkey gets beat up too. And one by one, they replace all the monkeys until eventually there are no more original monkeys left. All the monkeys left in the cage are new monkeys. They've never been doused with the foul-smelling water, but they all will not climb the sides of the cage, right? So none of them witness the original trauma, but all of them have the learned trauma experience. And so ancestral trauma can be a lot like this. If our ancestors go through some horrendous experience and they don't heal from it, they can pass the trauma behaviors on to their children. And then their children pass it on to their children. And next thing you know, you're several generations removed from the original betrayal, the original harm. But the behavior, the adaptive behavior is still continuing. And so ancestral trauma can be a lot like that, where we have incorporated this learned behavior, and it's perceived as coming from our ancestors. And it may or may not be in actuality, but we feel it that it is, and then it gets into your physical body. And so then that has to be addressed. And there's all kinds of methodologies for doing that. But what's important to remember is that trauma is something that's subject to our consent. Our consent is sacred. Our consent is sovereign, and our consent is holy. And consent is what runs the entire construct of reality. And it's one of the most powerful forces that created all of this. And so whatever traumas that we may have inherited from our culture, from our religion, from our parents, from our family, from our blood, all of that can be addressed with consent. And then once we make that decision that I'm no longer going to be defined by the trauma that we're carrying or the injury, then what will generally happen is that life because we've now made a choice. Life will open up a path, and the experience is going to open up options for us to address the very specific personal trauma that we're carrying. So what may be good for one person may not work for another. Perhaps it will. But the biggest thing that we can possibly do is to withdraw the consent of the trauma that we have, acknowledge it, withdraw consent, and then address it, and then move on and separate our personality from it. And so that's discussing the ancestral trauma, and is that like a real thing? But yeah, I won't delve into the rest of the conversation, but that's what I had to add on that.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's a great reminder of just how to kind of approach that process, and yeah, not get too obsessed with how somebody else does it. Certain techniques can be helpful to learn, but it is a individual journey of like how does that particular trauma, and not even as something to be upset with for happening, but how can we approach it from a state of gratitude? Like, how is this trauma deepening my connection with self, deepening my connection with love? It's by experiencing the contrast, yes. So it's not necessarily comfortable to go through that, but it's there for that reason, to deepen our connection with love. And so approaching it from that, then I can find my acceptance of it, and then that's the path to transmuting it. So yeah, great little out there. Thanks for that.
Sometimes, sometimes the trauma induced behavior is actually an adaptation that helps us to survive in a more hostile environment. For example, being having a perspective of always being in a poverty situation. So if all you know how to do is survive in a state of abundance and wealth, how are you supposed to survive the state of poverty and lack? So sometimes what we view as trauma is really just an adaptation. It's like a callus, and it helps us to endure a certain circumstance. And then once we move past that circumstance, then it's time to release that behavior. Um, so traumas aren't always, as you said, they aren't always an absolute negative.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I was referring to the ego, knowing that that's there designed to protect us until we're ready to step in and sort of graduate past the need of that protection. So we do respond to traumatic events and things with a immediate protection, and it's necessary in order to learn what that version of us is like. And it's like the song at the beginning, fidelity, and this guarding of our heart through this experience. But it's through that process that allows us to break the heart open and to grow more deeply in our capacity to love. So that's all necessary for that process. All right. And so he asked also, when we have reached the end, when have we reached the end so we don't have to incarnate anymore? So there's really no end, because there's nothing else. There's nowhere else to go. There's nothing else to experience. So sure, we could perceive an ending for a time. If you want to imagine what it's like to live in perpetual bliss and harmony and divine knowing and connection to all, a realization of self and all of that. But just to put it simply, we get bored of that. and we want to experience the other. We want to experience the fullest expression of what it's like to even fall away from that. So that's like what the first song talked about. You're my sweetest downfall. To be so connected and whole with self in one way, but also to sort of experience maybe even loneliness and a desire to have another. And so we sign up for it again. So I don't know. There's turning points. The sine wave has turning points. It has a peak and a valley. So there's turning points for sure. But isn't that just the beginning of a new cycle? And does that ever really end until this all ends? And perhaps that happens, and that ends for however long we want that to end until we do it again. So that also could be another cycle. And what's beyond that is beyond me. If there is, maybe, but it doesn't, it doesn't translate into this experience we're having now. So, I imagine that could be a choice we make when we have the capacity to choose that. And at the same time, after infinite time passes, then we fall right back in again. So, yeah. And then he says, our new soul is born. Yes and no. I mean, there's no other really. So we can sort of separate the bands of consciousness into unique individual frequencies as much as we want to, infinitely. But it's really just the same. It's just you. So, I'd imagine for the purpose of the experience, we would enjoy having a fresh perspective of a soul that maybe hadn't gone through any of these experiences before, just to see how that worked and what that felt like. But is that soul really new? No, because there's nothing else. There's no one else. So there's nothing really new to come from that. Even the experience might seem new, but it's not really like a new soul in that sense. So, yeah, I hope that makes sense. Again, it's a lot to talk about and challenging to put into words, but that's what I feel, at least based on what I've learned and what's been revealed to me through my experiences. And so that's the best I can give. So I will just pause there with that one, and say great questions, Philip. Thank you for those. And I'll pass it back and see if anybody else wants to jump in.
Hi, Justin. I got my microphone figured out. Is it okay if I go?
Yeah, awesome. Go ahead.
So I just hi, by the way. I just started back on Telegram after a year and checked your channel out again. And you guys over the last couple weeks been talking about like detoxing a lot and parasite cleanses. Right now I'm reading this book. This is Your Brain on Parasites, and it's very interesting what some of the scientific studies on parasites that have been repressed and hidden from us, so that way we could stay infected with parasites. Obviously the links that they went through to hide stuff is enormous. But you want to make sure from the parasite cleanses I've been doing, make sure you use a binder, or else when they die in you, all of the crap that they've been holding on to doesn't go anywhere, unless, especially if there's something wrong with your system, if your lymphatic system isn't working right, if you're inactive. Over this winter, I quit walking, and so between my cleansing that I was doing and the crap food that I was eating, I put on more weight, and so now I'm trying to take it back off and started doing more research on detoxing, especially with the parasites. I'll tell you this, the first time that I ever did ivermectin at Heidi's house, it was September, October of 2022. Day number 3, I didn't use a binder or anything. Day number 3, my skin was crawling. And that was even after I had, went raw vegan and was with you guys in Dallas eating clean and stuff. But So now that I'm not smoking cigarettes and I'm detoxing from everything, yes, you do get skin rashes and things like that. My face looks worse than, well, it's starting to clear up now, but for a while it looked like when I was in high school again, you know, it's actually worse. So just make sure that you're doing it right and you're moving your lymphatic system. If you don't have the things in your lymphatic system, like I had my appendix taken out, that's part of your lymphatic system, your detoxing system that they don't tell you about, along with your gallbladder. They say you don't need it, but no, you actually really do. So I got a vibration plate to help me and then I started walking again. So, and then another thing with this book that some of these studies, if you have cats at all and they've been outside, you probably already are a carrier of a parasite it's like T. gondii, and like billions of people are infested with this parasite, and 70% of schizophrenia cases that resulted in suicide, all of those 70% of them were carriers of this parasite. So I just found it really interesting the way the parasites do in fact could influence the way you think, the things you do. One of the studies was on crickets, and it showed that there was a type of parasite from a mosquito that a cricket would eat, and then it would literally commit suicide by going and finding water and jumping in the water. And the reason why it did that is the parasite inside of it would trigger it to go do that because it's a water parasite. And so in order to complete its life cycle, it needed its host to die in a body of water. And so there's just a lot of things with parasites that, especially with mental health, that if we start cleaning up our bodies, that's going to be great. But for me, as somebody who suffered for a very long time with suicidal thoughts, and the VA wouldn't help me. I went to go to counseling at the VA just in January when they said I don't have autism, but I probably most likely have BPD. So, and I wanted tools. And then, so the things that I wanted to talk about in counseling, well, then the VA counselor was like, you can't talk about that because we can't talk about that. So the VA won't let you talk about politics if you're trying to go to counseling for anything related to your time of service. So my best outlet has been like the people that I've met through you and Charlie Freak and Negative 48. So thank you for, being the connection with one of the connectors in my life. So yeah, that's basically just, if you're going to do a parasite cleanse, make sure you're doing it the right way, because you really could hurt your body.
Yeah, thanks for that. It is good to consider. There's a lot of information out there, and sometimes it can be challenging to weed through. And sometimes the best way we learn is through direct experience, but then we can learn through others as well, so that we don't necessarily have to go through the same things. We can learn from each other. So thank you for sharing that. And yeah, it is important to consider when we do any parasite cleanses to make sure our body's prepared to release them. So that's why, people like Dr. Morris are very, very stressed, very much so, the pathways of elimination, making sure that those are cleansed and clear before we kind of go deeper into detoxing. Because if we're doing heavy metal detoxes or parasite cleanses or anything in that capacity, and we can't eliminate them, we can't remove them out of our body, then they can end up moving from one area where our body was used to them into another where it's not, and that can have uncomfortable symptoms that emerge from that, even damaging at times. So some binders some people use like activated charcoal as a binder. Some people use bentonite clay. though I've heard mixed reviews about that one. Some people use psyllium husk to kind of like as a digestional cleanse to move things through. So those are some examples of binders. There are others out there that you can find. And our bodies all kind of react to different things differently and at different stages. So sometimes something that works for somebody might not work for you in that moment, because either you have two different compositions or you're just at two different stages of healing. So it's good to be aware that, like, ultimately we have to be the ones who experiment with things and take things slow and steady to figure out what works best. And yeah, it's quite the reality that we find ourselves in with this fallen state that we have gotten to, where the parasitic energy, that anti-Christic energy that dominates or has dominated this period, however long it's been, whether it's been 13,000 years or 2,000 years or however long, it's been pretty dominant, certainly as of recently, and it is a parasitic energy. So of course it's going to physically manifest as parasites within ourselves as well. And you could argue that they're the root cause of all disease that we face. Some people say acidosis, acidity, is the root cause. Some people say it's parasites. I think they just go hand in hand, and they're both, whether the acidic waste damages our body enough to where parasites can latch onto based on what we're eating and all of that, or the parasites are what causes the acidic waste and the problems. It doesn't really matter. The approach is the same. Cleansing the body, clean up what we're eating, focus on our environment, what we're subjecting ourselves to, and then going deeper in cleanses, but also rebuilding. You know, there's a time for cleansing and there's a time for rebuilding, and I wouldn't recommend trying to do both at the same time. Have a dedicated time where you're away from work and responsibility, and where you can go deeper into cleanses and fasting and things of that nature, and then have times of rebuilding after those stages so that your body can come back to stasis and balance. Just to stagger the approach that way. But yeah, thank you for bringing that up as far as parasite cleanses and your experience there. That's helpful. So appreciate that. And yeah, I'll just pass it back and see if anybody else wants to jump in with anything.
Just wanted to say one more thing too, because you guys were talking about ancestral trauma. Also, a lot of times parasites are passed down when we don't do cleanses. In the animal kingdom, a lot of animals are born with parasites. Dogs, for instance, anybody who has a dog knows they have to be dewormed when, after they're a certain age, because they're born with worms. Puppies are. So that could be a part of the I can't say that, the trauma as well, because we're around the biome of our parents. Our parents was around the biome of their parents. And so just like with unhealthy habits, it just gets passed down generation to generation. So it's about breaking the cycles.
Yep, exactly. It's all connected, all part of the same, that we're releasing. So yeah, thanks for that. And I saw two raise their hands. We'll start with Flora and then we'll go to Jeff. Go ahead, Flora.
Hey, I have a question about the moon. So I heard it's something artificially installed, and I'm just curious to hear more about what the moon is, and also if it's like something artificial. I'm curious, how would the world even look like without the moon? Also thinking about how some things are dependent on the moon cycle, and I just can't really wrap my head around that.
Well, you can't wrap your head around it because that's not real. The moon is a very real element and a very important element in this creation. And the idea put out there that it's some artificial satellite or some giant space station or whatever the narratives are to say that's a fake projection. I've even heard, even from the level Earth model, people saying that it's fake, but that just comes from, and not saying this about you at all. I appreciate the question because it's good to address. But it just comes from not knowing enough about what the moon is and how it is so important to this experience. And there is no other way for that to fit except for divine creation, the perfect balance between the sun and the moon and their cycle and how they move about and how they shift things. And there are so many things tied to the moon cycle. So yeah, there's no artificiality about it, but that is a part of the sort of like alien narrative that there's all powerful beings out in outer space that have created this giant space station that is fake, and or whatever way it's conceptualized, that there's ultra powerful beings that manipulated this creation to that extent to have something so influential and so pivotal in this experience be artificial. That's just not the case. It's a divine creation. Those narratives do make us feel small and powerless, which is the anti-Christic agenda. How can you take Christic beings and make them feel small and powerless? How can you enslave aspects of God? How can you enslave, budding gods? Because that's what we are. We are stemming from the same source. We are learning to step into our Godhead. Not saying that I'm more God or less than, or, be careful of the egoic traps that can happen with that idea. But also recognize that you are extremely powerful. And the only way we become powerless is if we believe it. We are so powerful that if we believe that, we become powerless, at least until we realize. So that's a part of the same deceptions that have been put out there to make us seem like we're powerless and, oh, there's something so much greater than us that can create an artificial influence and have this much effect on us. It's the same as the concept that we're tucked on some infinitely small speck at the corner of the universe and we're insignificant, and asteroids could come at any moment or aliens could come take us away and we're powerless against them. So we might as well just, drink ourselves, like party all the time and say, fuck it, because whatever, it doesn't matter. I can't do anything about it. Or from the religious perspective, that we are just like worthless sinners and we can't do anything about anything and we're powerless and Jesus is our only savior. So we better get in line and pay our church because they know what they're talking about and we don't. So I'm just giving more examples of that powerless state that those kind of narratives invoke. And again, that's the only way that we as infinitely powerful beings can be tricked into not being the case, which is the anti-Christic agenda of creating slaves. It's all about domination, control, subjugation, all that nasty stuff. So yeah, I respectfully reject that premise. I'm not saying that you're insinuating that that's true. You're just asking, and I do appreciate the question. But that's my firm stance on it, is anyone claiming that the moon is artificial is knowingly or unknowingly putting out that same narrative of us being powerless and subject to the whims of more powerful beings, which is just simply not true. So yeah, great question though. And I'll pass it back to you if you have any more on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm actually glad to hear that the moon is real. I also just heard it like 2 days ago, and so I haven't dived deep into this rabbit hole. But yeah, it resonates actually to hear that it's real. I'm curious, like, what is it though then, if it's real and if it's not? Like, I still I still don't really understand what the moon is then, besides that it's like a powerful thing that does influence us and is part of this creation. But yeah, like if I would go closer to it, what would I see?
That's a good question, and I hope that we get an opportunity to go closer to it. However, what I've learned about it is it's not physical. It's not some rock floating in space. It's not some far off distant planet thing. It's not something we can land on. It's to me, it's a representation of energetic frequency shown visibly. So it's a reminder of the cyclical clock that this experience represents and has. It's a light, it's a plasma, it's not a physical, it's also a map. It's a representation of the larger Terra. It's a map form, so it's a projection. And it has this appearance of floating around to give us, no matter where we are, a marker to see where we are and what's happening and what's the cycle, how's the year unfolding, how is this moving through it, but not to be confused with it being a planet that we can fly to or something that can be destroyed or any of that. I don't think it's physical at all. I don't think there's anything that you could really physically touch, and it might even disappear if you were behind it. Like it might be something that if you could even get behind it. And there's plenty of schools of thought around the various layers of the firmament, all having their own luminaries, their celestial bodies within that particular layer. So it's like, if you can imagine, it's like cups or bowls that fit into each other, and these bowls are upside down. And so it's like stacking bowls, and each of those bowls represents a layer of the firmament, and each of those has these light bodies within it. So as those layers move around us in this still level stationary plane that we're on, then they would represent the cyclical nature of the experience. But perhaps it's not something that we can, because the bowls also do limit physical passing through. Like we can't move through the layers of the firmament, so they would, perhaps not be something that we could even reach or touch. It would just have that same barrier that you can find plenty of evidence of the waters above, of rockets hitting the firmament, things not being able to pass through. And that's just simply a divine containment system so that we can learn here in this physical experience and not be subject to even the idea of something coming from outer lands or outer space or wherever to come harm us or subjugate us or any of that. It's just us, and we're all here now, and we're learning to go through this experience of forgetting and remembering so that we can learn more about ourselves. So yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks a lot.
Can I jump in?
You're very welcome. Yeah, please go ahead, Darth.
Briefly. So the sun is the manifestation of the descending masculine force. Okay. So the sun is the manifestation of the energy that comes from our unmanifested Father, heaven. Okay. And because of that, it bears the attributes of the divine masculine principle that's descending. However, the moon is the manifestation of the rising spiritual force that comes up from beneath our feet through the earth. And because that ascending feminine spiritual force is intelligent, see, the masculine force is what creates matter, right? But the rising feminine force is what animates that matter. So if there was no rising feminine force, we would have all the various materials that are on the periodic table. We would have gold and silver and iron and copper, but none of those, and carbon, but none of those things would be alive, right? We would be in a lifeless realm. But because there is a rising feminine spiritual force that's intelligent, she takes those things and she makes life out of it. Okay, but she's passing through the earth, ascending, returning back toward heaven. And because of that, the manifestation of her principle in the sky bears the shape of the earth. And that's why there's a map on the moon. And that's why it's a very ancient map, is because that rising feminine force is a very ancient energy that has been passing through the earth for a very long time. And it's a summation of it, of all the various visions of the earth and what the earth has looked like and all the various timelines. So it's an approximation of what the earth looks like. That's why it's not exactly like what it is. And it also bears the shape of the curvature of the event horizon and the barrier between our realm and the non-material realm. So the moon is a lot like a rainbow. You know, the rainbow appears to occupy a very specific place in time, but if you get in an airplane and you try to chase down the rainbow runs away from you because it's a plasmatic hologram. You can't ever catch a rainbow, right? And the moon is the same way. It looks like we're all looking at the same moon, but if we're standing many miles apart and we shoot a laser at the moon, the lasers would never intersect because we're looking at a hologram and we're each seeing our own individual copy of it. So, and it's not just that way. With the moon, everything is like that because we're not existing in a strictly physical realm. We're in a shared vision. The only thing that's actually absolutely real is the absolute goodness. That's real. Everything else is just a vision of that absolute goodness. And we're all just in our own individual world that has some overlap so we can interact with each other. But the moon is not a physical thing. You couldn't land on it because it's not material. It's just a vision of that rising feminine intelligent force.
Yeah, thanks for that. And it is these celestial bodies, including the sun and the moon, the stars, all the quote unquote planets. They are what help to remind us of our immaterial, non-physical nature, so that no matter how far we fall into attachment of physicality, all we have to do is look up and study ourselves from that perspective and see the magic and wonder that they represent. So thank you for that. That was very well explained. Yeah, I see. We'll go with Jeff and then Reno. Go ahead, Jeff.
Can you hear me?
It's a little quiet, but I think we can manage.
Okay, hold on. I'll see if I can just There you go. You should be able to hear me now.
Yeah, it's much louder. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so I ran across this question the other day that I couldn't really quite decipher. It kind of resonate with both, but yeah, I'm at work here, so I'll just say it off real quick, and maybe you can just elaborate on it a bit. It says, "Are you a physical being having a spiritual experience, or are you a spiritual being having a physical experience?" Yeah, kind of. I don't know. I can't quite tell the difference, I guess. So maybe you could elaborate a little bit on that. Thanks.
Well, it depends. Both. I mean, there's nothing that exists outside of the self. So the physicality is the self. The spirituality is the self. The sort of direction we're going in this moment is we're remembering that we're like moving towards remembering of the spiritual nature. We've forgotten that for so long. So sometimes having that reminder of I'm a spiritual being having a physical experience gives me that remembrance. But just as I mentioned, the cyclical nature, eventually the spirit having manifest and become embodied to such an extent will desire to have a physical experience again. And so then it could be flipped. It could into perhaps going in that direction. Though I do find the reference of spiritual being having a physical experience a little bit more helpful to remember, because physicality is so much more prevalent around us that we don't need to be reminded of it. It's there. So the reminder that I am a spiritual being having a physical experience takes away the edge of putting all my attention and focus on the physicality around me and remembering the spiritual nature that exists within as well. But it's all you, the physical you, the spiritual you, it's all you. There's no, there's nothing that exists outside of the self. So yeah, just to put it simply like that, I think that's how I'd say it. So Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that was great. Yeah, it was just kind of, yeah, it was just kind of hard, a little bit of a mind bender, but yeah, I knew you'd have a better way of laying it out. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. So I didn't really give much of an answer other than to say it's both, but I do prefer the I'm a spiritual being having a physical experience, because to me that's the more helpful reminder where we find ourselves in this moment, is that we are not bound to the physical. We are the physical, but we're not bound to it solely. We are both. We are the union between X marks the spot, the matrimony between physicality and metaphysicality. So yeah, great question. Thanks for that. Jeff, your mic is still open, just FYI.
All right,
Thank
perfect.
you.
Thanks, Justin.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, and I saw Reno raise his hand. Go ahead, brother.
Oh, hi. Thank you, Justin. Yeah, really appreciate yeah, this time together. Yeah, just had a few questions around yeah, just your like current thoughts around the nonviolent communication, and just yeah, what you think is how it can, what role that can have in our relationships when we're trying to, as we move into trying to heal a lot of these broken relationships, and people that are estranged from us right now, that that need for connection that hasn't been met, and yeah, how we can yeah, just try to reset in a way that brings a new kind of connection that's on solid foundation, so we don't fall in this way again. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot in there. So I'll start with just my thoughts around nonviolent communication. We did that show, Lila and I did that show way back on the topic, and I still find it to be a very helpful model for framing conversation in a way to where I'm not blaming or subjecting anyone to my judgments or things in that capacity, because that ends up being where the conflict often comes from, is when we're in that state. So as a model, I think it's wonderful. And if anyone's curious as to more specifics around it, you're more than welcome to go back to that show where we talked about it pretty extensively. And on my website post, there's a bunch of video references from the topic, that you can dive into. So it is great in that sense. And I would say that in a lot of times, and in my experience, it's been used and is still being used in a way to veil manipulation, to veil true intent, and to sort of stay in this sort of I have to construct everything that I'm saying in this way to achieve like an agenda. So I've seen it be used in that way many times, and I still see it being used in that way many times to say, which is a shame, because objectively it is a wonderful practice. But if it becomes the thing that I have to filter everything through, and it causes me to step away from being truly honest about what I am going through or what I'm noticing, to avoid stepping outside of the confines of what nonviolent communication represents, that's where it can start to shift out of the authentic nature that we are, and it becomes much more confining in a lot of ways. So that's just been my general experience with it. I don't have any issue with it being used, or I think it's wonderful to practice and to pay attention to, but also it's got its flaws, and as far as how it's implemented and for what reason it's being implemented for. And I've seen a lot of examples of things being bypassed or overlooked or not even spoken about, because it's then judged as if that, oh no, that's not nonviolent communication. So then, it takes the whole premise of nonviolent communication not being used to judge or label things, but then it is used to label anything that exists outside of that framework. So yeah, that's just my general feel around the topic. As far as like using it as a platform to reconnect, I think in some ways it can be very helpful, and in other ways it's been very unhelpful and almost used in a weaponized form, to where it's like taking away from the honest expression, as I talked about. And to me, honesty is paramount. So I would much rather somebody speak to me or speak about something in a truly honest way versus what can happen with the attempts of using nonviolent communication, which is where everything has to be sort of artificially paused and reconstructed in a way to where it almost loses that authentic expression. It loses that honest way of being, all to avoid offending or saying something that might come across any certain way. And to me, honesty is much more important. I'm going to go with that every single time. And so if nonviolent communication can be used in that way to where it's maintaining that authentic, honest expression, beautiful. I just haven't seen that happen in practice as often as I would like to know that that's not just being used as a way to veil intention or veil authentic nature. So yeah, that's where I kind of stand on that topic. But yeah, it's a great thing to learn about. Did you have any follow-up or any other? It was kind of hard to pick up on the exact question, so I'd love it if you have anything more to maybe speak more specifically or in ways that we can understand what you're saying, or if that satisfies what you're asking, then great.
Yeah, sure. I definitely heard, the part there about just the honesty being and authenticity, within sort of embodying a teaching, or taking forward like some kind of a a methodology that's then can override the true thing. I hear that. And there's definitely been guilty of that myself. And so yeah, it's but through in my experience through using it, I have noticed that in times when it's really confusing, like what's happening in a conversation, it's really useful to just reassure myself and the other person that truly that connection, or the person itself, is more important than what's right. That it's kind of like who's right is less important than what's right. But mainly that just that, like we're talking about before, about the sovereignty of choice and the kind of this aim to create a kind of more decentralized world where everyone's empowered to make choices as much as possible. Like freedom comes from the most amount of choice possible for everyone, the least amount of rules, and but that comes with that responsibility, or that open dialogue, the open feedback, And I found, by putting it in there in some difficult, relationships, where like the more serious relationships in my life, like my wife or my mom, these kind of things, I could just get more clear with her about, like I'm needing to be heard, or I'm needing to respect, or I'm needing that these things are just about what's happening in this moment. And yeah, with refinement, obviously not talking like a robot or something like this, or talking in a way that it's like a patient and a doctor or something, with any kind of pretense like that, because the need could be anything, and it could be equal choice, equal say. So it can be very dynamic to lead things to a more like definitive, impeccable way of thinking that's just more true. Like if someone's really loud, I wouldn't say, hey, that's too loud. I might could turn around and say, like, I'm needing quiet, I'm needing peace, because as soon as I say it's too loud or that they're wrong or something, it's, I'm entering into an argument, or something like that. So I guess that's all I wanted to ask you about, in terms of how to apply it in a way that is as much authentic as possible. And yeah, and just because you've done a show on it, I just wanted to know how it could be used in a way that's avoiding the pitfalls that you were talking about.
Yeah, it's a great topic and great question. I think it's a tool to use. It's a tool to keep in the tool belt. And when there is I'd say it's more effective for like a long-term strategy, and it can be quite helpful for moving into a more connective space and to removing the barbs from the language so that it's not taken in that way, or at least the risk of that is lessened. However, again, I've seen it be used in a way to veil intention and to skirt away from immediate harm being caused. And so for those responses, I'm still going to be very clear on the short-term immediate response to the saying, no, this is not acceptable behavior, whether this is somebody being bullied or somebody being raped or somebody being killed. I'm not going to approach that from a nonviolent communication route of like, let's get to the bottom of how they're feeling. No, the immediate response is to stop the harm from being caused. But if we use these sort of methods to someone who is actively trying to harm somebody else, then that can be used to dilute the intention and skirt away from the stopping of that action or that behavior. It's like what we're seeing now with what's playing out from what Trump is talking about with the cashless bail and all of this woke culture of saying, oh, we need to just forgive people or let them back out again. They didn't really mean it when they murdered that person, and all these different things, or they come from traumatic circumstances, so we should just look past it. But you do that, and then more people get harmed in the immediate. I'm not saying that all of those souls are lost and can't be rehabilitated, but there does come a point where there has to be a concrete action to say, no more. This is not acceptable within this space. And if you're going to remain in this space, then that has to be removed. And so again, it's a tool to use. I think it's a wonderful tool to pick up when necessary. But at the same time, I also see it being used in a sort of sneaky kind of way to dilute the immediate action of stopping the violent behavior. So then it becomes almost ironic that nonviolent communication is just used by those who are doing violence to continue that. And not always, but it has happened and is still continuing to happen from what I've observed. And so then it becomes a less healthy approach in those moments and more of a excuse for behavior that's harmful. And for that, I have to be more vigilant about in that particular moment. That's the divine masculine protector role, to say, this is not helpful. This is not okay. And we can address how we got here, and we can communicate through that. But I have to make that stop now. I have to stop the harm from being caused now and not be worried so much about somebody's feelings of stopping that harm. And then we can come back on the other end to repair and to move through that, get to the bottom of why did that happen in the first place. So it's like, there's a process to get to that. So yeah, again, that's my perspective on nonviolent communication and how it can be used and misused. And these are all from concrete examples in my life in recent years. And so that's where I stand with the effectiveness of that tool, and when is the appropriate time to pull it out, and when is the appropriate time to just say no, just to say stop. Like this cannot go on. So yeah, I'll just leave that one there.
Can I ask a question about is it the teaching or the that people sort of people's application of the teaching? Because Marshall Rosenberg's very clear on like the difference between physical violence and emotional violence, and would totally agree with you about the imperative to act in terms of preventing physical harm, but he does warn against conflating emotional safety with that tendency, like we were talking about intergenerational trauma before, and this kind of like fight or flight response to a perceived emotional safety threat, that treating emotional safety in the same way as physical safety. So yeah, I guess could you make the difference between how, because the actual teaching agrees with you on that. So yeah, I'm feeling confused.
Yeah, happy to go over that. So I would differ a little bit from how Marshall presents violence and has these two categories that they have to fit in, and our response is different to each. To me, violence is violence. So if someone is intending to harm with words, intending to harm with, it doesn't take away the responsibility of the one who is being subject to that to shift out of the ability for words and things to cause harm in that sense. But it doesn't change our response to it when we're witnessing it happening. If someone is using language or emotional triggers to beat someone else down and they're not using their words, sometimes those wounds, and we can see this with childhood growing, sometimes the emotional wounds, the non-physical wounds, traumas that somebody experiences are much more detrimental and challenging to grow past than physical trauma. So I would disagree with Marshall's perspective on treating them differently. It's the same approach. When intent to harm is there, even if we're all doing our best. So I'm not taking away from the compassion of knowing that somebody who's trying to harm somebody else with their words or physically is coming from a space of deep pain. And that pain is ultimately there for us to look at and to resolve as a whole. But for that immediate action, if that harm is being projected onto somebody else, then it is my duty as a witness to that event to do my best to stop that harm from being committed, and not to present it in from a nonviolent communication sort of way that can cause things to be delayed to be talked about, cause things to be watered down as far as what is the immediate stopping of that. And it's just immediate action. No, we're going to stop this here and now because this is clear. And then we can move into how we got here, and we can use the nonviolent communication as a wonderful model to get to that space, as long as all parties are willing in that area. But if that immediate harm doesn't get stopped and the nonviolent communication is automatically pushed in, then the one who's causing the harm simply just uses it as a mask to hide what they're doing, be inauthentic, and continue going about in a harmful way, should they so choose. I've seen that happen time and time and again. So that's where I'm cautious about having a blanket, one-size-fits-all approach to using nonviolent communication. It's helpful when it's helpful, and when it's not, it's very much not helpful. But it's more in those sort of immediate responses to stopping harm from being caused, and where are the long-term approaches for rectifying and healing. So again, it's a tool to pull out of the tool belt at the appropriate time. But not all situations are advantageous to use that particular tool in that moment. But yeah, thanks for the question. I appreciate the dialogue on that. And it's certainly something to continue experimenting with and learning and growing from. And all we have is our experience to see how things are shifting, moving. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have something else? Go ahead.
Yeah. I really appreciate your perspective, Justin, and it means it's fascinating to just be here together and talking about this. So yeah, just wanted to share that. And to me, the American values, or the values of Christ, coming back to if there is no harm, there is no crime. And the treating others as we would treat ourselves, treat your neighbor, love your neighbor as yourself. And I think Marshall's perspective to verbal violence is which is moralistic judgments. You are a so and so, or you should do this, or you have to do this. Taking away choice from others with demands is usually it's a cry for help, or it's a please. There's a lack of empathy. There's an apathy, or an indifference, or a callousness, or an anti-apathy, a fear, a dislike or hostility. And that, there's some kind of just to hold strong and not hear the judgment so much, to still love the person, love a racist, but don't, we're not here to condone racism, or I'm not condoning racism, but we still love the racist, or whatever sort of ism. So yeah, I just wanted to finish on that. So thanks, Justin.
Yeah, totally welcome. And it's again, it's not always a one size fits all approach, because when intent to harm is there, any avenue to, so if we offer that sympathy or that empathy in that moment, while it can be a very loving gesture to do that, if someone is intending to harm, then that appearance of them being a victim and receiving the sympathy can also just be used as a weapon, or as a way to rally more to their cause, to continue subjecting others to more harm in that way. I've seen that used as well, so we just have to be very mindful of where can I apply that compassion. Sometimes the compassion, and we can look at the words of Jesus, of Yeshua, to see he didn't speak in nonviolent communication. He said, "Get behind me, Satan," when that satanic influence took over, I believe Peter or Simon. So that's that from nonviolent communication perspective, that would be a very violent thing to say. Yet I don't think it was the wrong thing to do in that moment, when a spirit of fear had consumed that to such a degree that you needed that severity to snap through. So that is almost a higher level of sympathy or empathy, to have that layer of connection, and to give that jolting bolt to say, cut that shit out, stop with the harm, stop projecting fear, stop doing that in that kind of way. And so again, I don't like how sometimes, if we view everything from the NVC lens, it can limit that divine inspiration to move through and to stop something from happening, or to have an abrupt thing to say to somebody. But for the overall healing process, when all parties are willing and able to move through that, it can be a great model to follow. So it just depends on the application and the scenario. And I've seen I've seen criticism of Marshall for having that approach as well, and it's sort of leaving room for more. And again, like even just trying to model language outside of the NVC model, but bad or harmful behavior. And I know that's a judgment, but there are actions where it's like, that's intending to hurt somebody. That's allowing this anti-Christic nature to consume us. There is such a thing as possession. We can allow ourselves to be possessed by pride or lust or greed or any of these things, and being possessed by that, we can do some of the most heinous things. Now, granted, we can always come out of that. We can have an exorcism happen, through, sometimes NVC can be helpful to bring that forward, and can be helpful for that exorcism to take place, for that demonic thought pattern to release from somebody. But it can also be used for that sneaky, the devil is the deceiver, as in this energy that can exist in all of us. It can be used as a deceptive tactic to cloak itself and go further and cause deeper harm. So it's just something to be mindful of from my perspective. And again, that's just how my experiences has led me, and I'm open to continuing to explore the topic and using it for that way. But in just practical application, I've witnessed that, and so I think it's something important to consider. At least it has been for me in my life. But I do appreciate the question and the dialogue around it, and yeah, thanks for bringing it forward. And yeah, so
Can I say something?
yeah, go ahead.
Hey, this is Lila. Really enjoying the conversations today. And as you were speaking, I was just thinking about the kind of difference between this idea that Eckhart Tolle brought up about the pain body, and the pain body being sort of a flaring, which I kind of in my mind correlate to sort of what you were just speaking about, this kind of, some people might call it ego, some people might call it the devil, some satanic, like just this like flare up of that energy. And then having, worked a bit with nonviolent communication, how that can, those two things can kind of have a lot of contrast with each other, because I do deeply appreciate the carefulness with linguistics that Marshall shows us and supports us in using. And I do get the giraffe heartedness of his wish to have this peaceful place where people can come with their observations, emotions, requests and needs, right? And it's such a beautiful place. And being in that place to express those things in this way, it can be so healing to have those conversations. And I've had quite a few of them, and it's been so lovely. And then I also can see what you're speaking about, Justin, where there's this energy where the being is kind of using that as a sneaky armor in a way. And mostly I think that comes down to a deep feeling of not being loved. And then we can slide into the realm of attachment or connection theory, right? That there's not stable connection, secure connection, that there is some type of behavior that's stemming out of this place of disorganized connection. And so it's so tricky. It reminds me of like the Steiner teachings around being in this realm of not a moralistic judgment, but also a position to see when you are dealing with somebody who can't even really grok what you're saying. And how I would look at that, or what I would use as an example would be like if I'm taking care of a toddler and the toddler is hitting somebody else, I'm not going to not stop the toddler from hitting that that knee, right? Yes, I'm going to be loving. I'm going to approach the toddler in the way that I can, but I'm also going to perceive that my awareness and consciousness levels are at a different place. One could argue there is a hierarchy there, right? I'm coming from a mature place where I'm seeing if this toddler continues to hit this other toddler, then hurt is being caused. And so I am going to step in and say, no, that's unacceptable behavior. And so it's this tricky reality, because when you are in that place, Steiner and others would say that it is an act of integrity to move forward and stop the behavior, right? And then, yes, my need, my observation, my feeling, my need, my request of you. And I do love that. I think that having had my son Elliot for so long and having been introduced to nonviolent communication when he was young, putting things in those, terms like, I'm not ordering you to do this, but this is a request of mine, right? But then there are these fundamental things that are just absolutely not workable. No, I'm not going to let you hit this person. And can that little child even see it from, eagle's eye point of view, right? So yeah, I just was, all of those things were coming up to me in sort of the intersection between all of these different teachings. And I'm not saying that I know the answer, but I do know that these are all things that I've grappled with of understanding, and mostly with myself being somebody who tends to kind of take abusive behavior from people, and yes, that could be called a judgment, but I am a people pleaser for the most part, and I do tend to do that. And so I'm learning for myself of like, okay, that's the line there. I'm not going to subject myself to that after a few good, well-intentioned tries, right? And so I don't know, I'd be interested to hear what either of you would have to say about that. And, maybe hear that either now or at a later date, kind of role played or modeled around, how do you step in and make that call, right? Because I too have been on the side of seeing a lot of kind of not giraffe-led sort of sneakiness or snarkiness when attempting nonviolent communication, and it's been very challenging. It reminds me of, I don't know if they have this in other countries, but in America, there's a story in the Deep South, and it's about the tar baby. And, this idea that when you start interacting with the tar baby, you just get stickier and stickier. And I'm really grappling with my experience of that happening when I'm dealing with people with a nonviolent communication lens, or just in general trying to work something out. It seems like nothing that I could say will ever be taken with giraffe ears, and that I could say the simplest, most loving thing, and it will be taken with hyena ears. And I'm willing to try, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, but then after a while, it's kind of, it can feel like the pain body is flared, and it's just sucking the energy, and I just walk away with more tar on me, unable to move about my daily needs, because it's so sticky and heavy and challenging to deal with. So thank you. I just wanted to speak to that from my perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Lila. I agree. It's very it can be nuanced, and like anything, the only constant in this experience is change. So having a fluid way that we approach things is helpful in all cases. You know, again, to acknowledge the beautiful gift of nonviolent communication as a tool to keep in our tool belt, and also knowing when that tool doesn't really fit the scenario. So to have that fluid approach to that. And yeah, I mean, sometimes the best thing is just to move away. If something like NVC can't even be broached from a respectful place, and it's still warped in that sort of deceptive nature of using it for ulterior motives, or to use to subject someone to whatever that may be, then it might just be more indication that that's just not the space to be in, which that has been clear at times as well. Or those are the people I'm not supposed to be around, at least for this time, and then come back when I feel like there is more of an authentic, true wanting of that connection, instead of just the empty words of saying I want to create that connection, but then the actions reveal otherwise. So yeah, I just think there's a lot of nuance to when it can be applied and when it's used effectively.
Yeah, it's interesting listening to Lila. I understood what she was saying about like a child, you know, hitting another child. But I wasn't, and I know what you mean, that there's these moments where, you know, like whether it's the emotional violence is so close to a physical violence. Like there's a visceral sort of imagination of someone hitting me like a child when I'm in a conflict with someone, you know, and I, you know, I yeah, I had to really analyze that for myself about is this a physical thing, or where is, or is it, am I, I'm having an adult conflict though in a non-physical way. I'm talking with someone, but I'm feeling physical pain. You know, it was a real, I had to really ask myself, what am I needing? You know, and it's, I'm needing a break. I'm needing to reflect. You know, it's like I felt a lot of pain in those things, and yeah, there's. I think that's, yeah, that's what really helped with this process of, you know, in whatever situation, as you say, Justin, that you're seeing you said that it's being used for manipulation. Like it's like the unmet need sounds like clear, direct talk. You know, you're needing just to understand, you know, what they're needing, and to get more quickly into what's really happening. So yeah, I think that's not necessarily a fault of the teaching. I think it's more the application, and yeah, I think in every situation, you know, there's always the opportunity to ask oneself, what am I needing, especially when it gets between like verbal, like we live, you know, America is this land of free speech, you know, like turn the other cheek. It's you know, open dialogue and debate, and offensive things are said all the time. You know, what if we were taught, you know, from a young age, how to speak in a way where it's direct. What's alive in us right now? I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling scared. You know, my need for language, for people to speak to me in a way that's I can understand, that's clear and direct, you know, isn't being met. You know, and can you please, you know, speak to me like that, you know, or I'm gonna have to go, or I'm gonna you know, I'm gonna need my own space. And I just think in terms of a peace, you know, de-escalating, peacekeeping way, not entering into the game of like if there's a kind of bullshit sort of devil game going on with the language, of like tit for tat, eye for an eye, whatever role models we want to look at for that. It's a zero-sum game, and I see this nonviolent communication as a way of stepping out of the game, not even playing the game, and just being more true with the words and saying, and with the thoughts and the feelings that from the heart, I don't want to, I'm needing this. It doesn't mean that there's no shame or guilt on your part. This is just purely and true what I'm needing right now. And that means that I'm needing space, or I'm needing to talk to you about this later. Or I'm needing more clarity on this. Could you help me here? But yeah, that's where I felt unsure, because I was needing clarity on the essence of the teaching being truly applied. I was feeling frustrated because, with my own sort of journey of trying to learn it, I acknowledge that I haven't been very responsible with that, because it is like words are powerful, and but yeah, I can understand other people's unmet needs around how it's been applied in general and that kind of thing. Anyway, I just wanted to so I guess my request would be just what situations could it be used for?
Yeah, again, it's a great topic to go over, and you were a little quiet there, but I think I got the gist of what you were saying. So the where I have struggled with it is approaching that, saying the needs very clearly, being very, very clear on owning the feelings, expressing the needs, making the request, and then being met with an indirect, and of course this could be labeled as a judgment, but when the actions continue pointing towards the other party's needs of me just going away, or somebody else just going away, leaving their space in whatever capacity. So the challenge is navigating that when it is a shared space, to have someone who feels that that is their need and is unwilling to actually express that, yet it's still coming through all the behavior. That's where it becomes challenging to not, to do anything more with, because I've expressed my needs. I've expressed my feelings. I've made my request. And then the requests are not fulfilled as far as honest, direct communication. The connection doesn't even seem to be a desire or want. And the need that is unspoken is that I just go away. I'm just not liked and not wanted by that individual, no matter what I say, no matter how I present myself or what I do with that. So I've run into that challenging scenario. And as I've said before, I recognize that I'm a polarizing figure. I recognize that things I say are not always the most popular, and I don't ever intend to do anything to cause any harm with whatever I say, but people do take offense to what I have said or how I present myself, and simply just for the way that I am. And so that presents a challenging scenario of how to navigate that. If somebody's needs are, I need you to go away, or my request is that you go away, and maybe I don't want to leave a shared space, or maybe I don't feel they have the right to insist that I leave or go away. And on a deep level, they might know that they can't actually make that request without coming across in any particular way. So then it becomes an avenue to just veil the true intention and veil the real thing that they might want to say, to avoid that perception of others. And then we're just stuck in the muck with spinning in words and having been expressed, and we're there. And so then it just becomes, of course, it's always a choice to walk away, and that has been, and what I will continue to do when I'm met with that layer. But just from a place to establish connection, if both parties are not really wanting connection, then how can that really be done? You know, how can that really be fulfilled? It can't. And it has to be the desire of both to truly want to connect, to truly want to be there. And I get that on some level, we're all yearning for that connection. Yet there is this anti-connection energy that can possess any of us and bring us into that space, and that can be used in that way to manipulate whatever words or things that are said, no matter how well they're presented, to still be achieving this sort of like, I don't want to be connected with you, so I'm going to do anything in my power to make that happen, to drive you away, to bully you or bully whomever to the point to where they leave, because that's really what I want. And I'm just not willing to say it. So that's a challenging scenario to try and fit in the NVC model, especially when you're dealing with shared spaces. And it's like, who has the right to tell somebody that they should leave just because they don't like them? You know, that doesn't seem very fair. And, you know, I need direct communication and honest, clear communication. And if someone's refusing to do that with me, then yeah, then it presents another challenging scenario. It's like, well, how can I trust this connection if that can't even be met? If I can't move through in that way, and then it's like this impasse that we reach. So yeah, just more examples to show for when I've run into challenges of fitting into whatever model of communication, no matter how gentle or direct or open or willing. It's still there. You know, this the true intention is still there. Again, not often spoken of. And it would actually be easier to be with if somebody just would say outright, I don't like you and I don't want to be around you. At least that would be a refreshing burst of honesty that we could work with and say, okay, well, we don't have to be intimately around each other, but let's respect each other in shared spaces, kind of thing. And I see NVC as this, you know, as we've talked about, this avenue that unspoken need or want or request of somebody to just leave, it's hard to meet. You know, it's hard to work with if that's not even spoken to. And so, yeah, just more challenges with that model and with any model, really. You know, it wouldn't matter how we approach communicating in that way, if that's still the underlying agenda is like, no matter what, I'm going to try and drive this person away because I simply just don't like them, and it doesn't matter what they do or say, I'm still going to hold that position. Then it creates a scenario where it's like, okay, well, somebody probably is going to leave, and how is that going to unfold? How is that going to happen from this perspective? And so, yeah, again, I appreciate the dialogue around it, because it does present the difficulty and challenge with navigating and knowing what to do when connection is really not wanted. It's not even on the radar of somebody in that space, in that configuration. How do we approach that? So I'm not asking you necessarily, but I'm just throwing another perspective on that, of where I've seen NVC or just that generally that challenge come up and what to do with it, other than just to accept that it's just the nature of us flowing and moving and shifting as we need to. And we're not always going to like or even want to be connected with everyone, and trusting the flow and how that evolves and moves and shifts through that. That's been the only space that I've found peace within that, is just trusting that, okay, well, whether they speak it directly or they show it through their actions, I can still get clarity on that to some degree. And if there's an unwillingness to be honest and have any sort of connection, even one to say, I don't like you, but I'm going to be respectful in shared spaces, then it presents the other scenario of like, well, then we probably need to reconfigure the spaces that we are sharing to some degree, so that there's not this much, whatever's going on. So yeah, I'll just leave that there. And yeah, Yeah, that's all I got.
To say also, when you're speaking, there's always love. I mean, just to say that you're not going to be in community with somebody, or that behavior doesn't work for you, or these types of things, or even have a clear boundary to leave the space if you're not feeling the energetics. That doesn't mean that you don't love that person. Sometimes that's the most loving thing you can do. I'll speak about something that happened for me recently where I left the space, and that really was the most loving thing that I could do for myself and for the others around me, to remove myself, because I was dealing with something that really had very little to do with the space that I was in. And I think this like radical honesty, where it's really beautiful, because as truthers and patriots and so on, we're really enjoying radical honesty, but sometimes it can burn a little bit, others and ourselves. And, but like really down at the base of it is love. And, the perception that it isn't is something that has been a challenge for me. It is loving to take the toddler and say, no, we're not going to hit. That ultimately is the kindest thing that you could do in that moment. So yeah, there's so many layers to it, but just wanted to throw that in too.
Yeah. How's that? Can you hear me better? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, is that good? Okay. Yeah, interesting. Like the word manipulate is an interesting one, because Marshall talks about that as like it's if it's used for like shame or guilt to kind of coerce someone to get their own needs met, that's sort of that's what it kind of means, right? That's essentially what the idea is. It's a narcissism. It's a and yeah, in terms of like what you're saying, Justin, about if someone's request to you is that you leave, then that's you always try to meet their needs, meet their request. If it's an individual, if it's like a group and there's like lots of people, yeah, then that can be definitely like much more different. And yeah, I guess it's hard to sort of find the way through that. I don't know how I would do it. I mean, I guess I would ask the group like for a coherent response to my request of, do you guys want me here? Is that something that the group is consenting to? Is and continue to search for coherence amongst the group, to see if the group can sort of be a catalyst for the group to like sort of have those conversations and movements that are needed in amongst the group, to allow for just more clarity, for everyone in that space. And yeah, I mean, it is really, I find it really tricky to avoid like judgmental words, and to try to spin it around, almost invert it and say like, so I'm they're manipulating me, or they're saying I'm talking in spin. So what are they needing then, if that's what they're calling for me? It's like the shield of a knight, is that virtue? So what is the unmet need that they're needing? They're questioning me on a virtue in this experience. And if it's manipulation, then they're questioning me on my ability to be sort of transparent, and upfront and direct and forthright, So there's a call to not change my behavior, but to just demonstrate that I have that virtue in the feedback sort of conversation, and we can either choose to go along with their request, or we can see it as checking, is it a demand, because I might not feel like that right now. Can I say no? So yeah, I don't know. I think we all are doing this in our everyday relationships that are working really well. But I guess it's hard to, in those ones where the other side is very much in demands and judgment of us, even in our perception, and it's like, can we stay in that persistent sort of role modeling to sort of rein it back? And like, just because they say something, does it necessitate that we have to feel the pain that they're sort of like intending us to feel? Are we that porous in a way? Or that's the question I have for myself. So yeah, and I just wanted to. We don't have to talk about this all day. I have another question actually about the Southern Hemisphere stars and flat Earth, but if they fit into the model and that kind of thing. But I don't want to take over, Justin. Thanks so much for acknowledging so far what we've been talking about.
Yeah, of course, and thank you for bringing it up and the willingness to navigate these kind of tricky situations. And yeah, it does become very challenging when it's a group dynamic and you have a few that perhaps are either directly expressing that need or that request to have somebody leave, to have myself leave, but unwilling to actually speak to it or engage around it to uncover where does this underlying thing come from, so then it doesn't get talked about, but the actions continue demonstrating that agenda of like, I want Justin to leave. I don't want him around. I want him removed. I want him out of this space. And yeah, it does become very challenging to know how else to respond because I love feedback. I really do. I love feedback on tangible ways that I can shift, tangible ways that I can move through or improve on my communication, how I show up, and all of that. And that is what I request very regularly whenever something is brought up or something I do doesn't rub somebody the right way or any of that. I'm trying to find where is the tangible action that I can take to even just acknowledge what is happening. But sometimes that's often not provided because it just comes back to, well, I just don't like you. And it's like, well, what am I supposed to do with that? Like, how am I supposed to shift? I can't be any other way. And I don't do anything to try and, create that environment, but it's there. And so then it becomes this, just like, how do you approach it? What else can I do with it? If that's truly how somebody feels, and there is an unwillingness to even engage or move to tangible feedback, or what can be improved to improve the relationship or improve the connection. But seemingly the only desire is just to disconnect. And if you're in a shared space, then it's like, who has the right to tell somebody else to leave if even a portion of the group doesn't agree to that removal? So then it's like, who's got the right to say that? To say, oh, just because I don't like you, you have to leave, and I'm not going to give you any feedback to help improve our relationship, or even be willing to engage in a conversation to move in that way. I just want you to leave because I don't like you. That's where it gets tricky, because it's like, okay, well, if like you said, if that were a shared consensus within the group, then yeah, no issue whatsoever. But if it's a shared space with multiple perspectives on it, then who has the right to dominate that and ostracize somebody just because they don't like them? And then when that objective is not fulfilled directly, or even not even attempted to, then it becomes a passive aggressive kind of way of, how can I pester someone until that reality comes, until I get what I want. And then where is that set up to, So just presenting more challenges that I've faced in recent years within the dynamics of the online spaces. And I think that's a huge area of where this comes from, is the even if we're using our voices, but the appearance of separation being greater leads to more potential and less ability for the nonviolent communication can approach to work, because there's ample time and ways to either conspire through writing or even through speech and voice messages, and lots of time spent, which can be used in a helpful, desirable, to connect way. If the intention is truly to connect, sometimes that can be helpful. But if the intention is to disconnect, then I can use that time to manipulate my words or how it comes across to bring more to that perspective of like, I just want this individual to leave because I don't like them. And I'm not actually going to address my work or how I reach that space. I'm just going to do anything to poke at that individual until they decide to leave, until the circumstances are so unbearable for them that they're out, which is exactly what a bully does, and that's again, like, I don't enjoy using judgmental language, but it is very much an energy that responds, and I know it comes, and I can compassionately look at the unmet needs and the traumatic patterning that can lead someone to that position. And at the same time, if that individual is not wanting to move out of that way, no matter how it's presented or how it's discussed or whatever, then where do we draw the line as far as like tolerance to say that energetic, pointing, that antagonistic behavior to achieve your objective of causing somebody to leave, to bully somebody out of your life, it's not acceptable in this space. That's how I prefer to move. That it would be a need for mine, is that I'm surrounded by people who have an intolerance for that kind of antagonistic behavior, not from a lack of compassion, but just from a saying, if someone's not willing to come to the table and actually work through their issues and take responsibility for whatever they're going through, and wants to keep projecting that at others, then sometimes separation is ideal. And I'm not saying that that's not the right approach and things, and has been my approach that I've taken in when that seems to be more of a group consensus, or at least just a tacit approval from silence of onlookers. Yeah, it's very interesting to navigate the online spaces. So I do think that in physical community, then that becomes much less of a likelihood for someone to adopt the jackal ears and then veil and pretend like they're wearing the giraffe ears when they're being perceived in the online space, and then go back to the offline space and put on the jackal ears and conspire to act in that way. There's much less room for that when you're physically around somebody and physically engaging with somebody, and they can read your whole energy, connect with your body language and all of that. It's much less likely for that energy to take over. But in the online spaces, it seems much more apt to happen when there is unresolved things within whomever. So yeah, just to say more on that. But yeah, we don't have to keep going on this topic. Just I do appreciate you bringing it up, though. It's a great model to speak about. And again, I don't want to dissuade anyone from exploring nonviolent communication and what it can bring to us and how it can be helpful in so many different applications. But I just want to share truly my authentic. All right. Sorry, everyone. That was a little hiccup there with closing down the live stream. So we're back, and yeah, I'm going to merge these two parts. So just pick right back up where we were. And Lila, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say also what I'm grappling with is, I love in nonviolent communication where he talks about people don't make you feel a certain way, that you own your feelings, because yes, it could have to do with unmet needs and desires with that specific person. But it could have to do with 50 million other things to do, that are going on that day or in your life or whatever. And I'm you talked about the shield of virtue, and the perception that somebody may have that they're, that you're putting, let's go back to as an example, putting the spin on something. And the challenge that I have is that I do have a need to be heard for my authentic self. And I find sometimes when I'm attempting to clarify my behavior or feelings about something to somebody else, there really truly was just a misunderstanding that has happened. And I know in my heart where I'm coming from, but then that's just turned even more by that person of like, well, now you're getting defensive, or you haven't done the work. Another term would be called spiritual bypassing, right? Like, let's just send some light to that and let it heal, these kinds of things. And, that is a real challenge of mine, because as somebody who I feel like I strive to be 99% honest. I know I don't succeed all the time, but for the most part, I'm pretty freaking honest, and that's part of my human design too. But it's like when I'm being very authentic and very honest about where I'm coming from, but if the perception by the other being is completely different based on whatever they have created in their own mind, then that's where the tar baby comes in. Because I feel like, to step in and try to explain that with somebody who's still in that, shall we say, pain body activated or these kinds of things, then how can they hear? How can they hear? And I do appreciate Marshall's different ways of trying to get to that. But what I do see is that when he's working with people, it's people that are mostly coming to the table for the most part with both parties wanting to be there, even if it's just for the other, right? There really is this openness that I see. And that's where it hasn't really translated to real life for me, because you see in the workshops where they're working with it, and he might role model or do these role play with these different people, and oftentimes they've chosen to be in that workshop, and they are having that conversation because they want to get better at nonviolent communication. But what if you are dealing with a group of people or a person who's just like, what the F? I don't give a F about nonviolent communication. I care if you say to me, I don't make you feel a way. I'm not going to own how I feel. You're getting defensive. Then it gets into that tar baby realm where it's like, how can, you lift yourself into a space where there's even a good understanding that can be reached. So that would be another thing that, I don't know if you could speak to that specific thing, but maybe in your experience, if that's happened or not. But it does seem to be just a way. I mean, I don't want to use the word manipulated, but it is a way that can be manipulated from the unconscious realm, the unconscious self. I'm not saying that each of us are, the way that I believe, where I'm coming from, for everyone that I'm interacting with, is that we are Christed beings, that we're working towards full Christhood. But there are these places where people are operating from a very unconscious place. So if they're not even going to make the space to say, come to Ashanti Sena and have those conversations, then what does one do with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, that's staying connected to how it affects them, or like one step at a time, and that's, I think, really short, like dialogue of like you know, maybe what I'm feeling, what I'm needing, or even a question of what are they feeling this, are they feeling that, and a question. You know, like I think Justin said before, if someone says, I don't like you, how do you respond to that? And I met an amazing Jewish guy who said that, you know, he calls it baby giraffe. He was calling me a baby giraffe and always teasing me at the Rainbow about a year ago. He said, you speak in baby giraffe. What are you doing? You just do it like this. And he said, you just go straight up to someone and say, well, what is your request? And then, you know, so you don't like me. What is your request? And, you know, it was brilliant because the person would say blah 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 blah, you know, and you go, okay, I noticed you're angry, because you're not getting this, whatever, and you know, you want me to, yeah, and then he would just say like, so is this a demand or a request, and that you want me to do something for you, right? And then every time if they said it was a demand, he'd be like, he'd just walk away. But if it was if they sort of pretended it was a request, he would say, "Oh, great! So I have the option to say no," you know, and then he would walk away. So, so either way, he was able to at least
Can we
respond.
backtrack? Hold on a sec. I'd love to just interject. Can we backtrack to the word that you just said? Pretending.
Yeah.
What about the pretending?
The what? The pretending.
You just said that if they're pretending to have a request, he would just walk away. And I'd like to highlight the word pretending, because if somebody doesn't even know thyself well enough to know what their words are transmitting, to take responsibility either by realizing it as it comes out of their mouth, or also as, you know, maybe later, for instance, not remembering what they said, right? If they're not in that place of consciousness to be mindful and, you know, back to the agreements, impeccable with their word, if they're not being mindful of that, then that is a state of pretense. And then how do you go forward from that? Because they are not even seeing that they're pretending to make a request when they really have a demand.
Yeah, good point. And I mean, it's that, you know, if they have a genuine request that can be met, you know, in a way that is possible, then that's fine, you know. But yeah, if it is a kind of, if they're just saying it's a request when you can kind of feel it's a demand, then you can say, well, you know, my need is for a spirit of true request to be met in this case, and you know, I'm needing trust that what you're asking me is that really a demand or is that really a request? And you know, I'm needing honesty with this. Would you be able to answer that question again? Is this, what is your true request here? You know, give them every chance to sort of come back with it. You know, it's really like a kind of positive polarity and negative polarity, you know, and like in a magnetic sense, the positive polarity can sort of flip the negative polarity by just being, you know, it's more powerful and it wins every time as long as it really stays in that integrity itself, and with that sort of persistence, and it might take a while, but you know, magnets rubbing up against each other, against metal, do eventually, you know, gain that conductivity. So yeah, I think it's really key to stay connected to how it affects them, and to like 4 sentences maximum, you know, and to always finish with that request, you know, back to them. And you know, like if I'm feeling angry, it's probably because there's something sacred that's been trodden on, you know, and there's a sort of an angry mummy bear that's coming out to protect the baby bear within me. And so if I'm encountering a no within myself, or I don't want to meet someone else's need, it's probably because I have a pretty serious unmet need in there. And any no is a signal of an unmet need from anyone. So yeah, it's just, there's often a lot of empathy first aid that's needed in a lot of these situations. And yeah, it's like passive aggressive or manipulated as words. You know, to have them as part of the vocabulary is you know, it can, in terms of the negative polarity and its interaction with those words, I've noticed it might not be one of those ones that really works to depolarize that, you know, and you know, like when I hear someone speak that way, you know, I feel a sense of sadness, you know, because yeah, I'm needing them to say what is within the manipulation or the passive aggressive behavior, what is the specific, you know, quote of that, you know, it's sort of a you know, are they needing autonomy or respect or safety or understanding or authenticity? There's so much depth to, you know, to that statement of you're speaking passive aggressive to me, so, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, I guess I'm just asking for how can we step into this positive polarity and transmutation of you know, do we believe in this idea that, you know, I guess I'm asking Justin and Lila and anyone else, the positive polarity, does that analogy I mentioned around the magnetic sense of that's an Aaron Abke sort of law of one teaching. What's the sense there?
Absolutely.
Flesh
I mean,
that out. Go ahead. Go ahead. I was just going to mention the judgment paradox, and I agree. I do think that it can be there, and it can certainly trigger some people, and maybe we can explain that briefly. But this reality of, you know, this place where people can come together, approach an interaction or something with this like mentality where they're harboring a deep fear of being judged themselves. So then they're sort of on the offensive, just to clear that up if nobody's heard of that. But yeah, you know, I mean, personally, I feel like I've tried to give it many passes, but then it gets to the place where it's like, okay, we've tried, you know, 3, 4, 5 again, like how many times are we going to try this? And then just to keep getting shut down by that person, no give at all. Then eventually it becomes, for me, as I've gotten to a place of boundaried decision making, it's been like, okay, this is when I walk away from this, because I've, you know, for instance, attempted to speak with you privately. I've attempted to speak with you. I've attempted, you know, it's like I've been that magnetic pull multiple times, you know, in that positive realm, and then it just keeps getting flipped back on its back, like a bug being turned on its back over and over again. And eventually, first of all, that's you know, I would like to be in community where I'm able to crawl through life and be the bug that I'm meant to be and pollinate the flowers that want me. So this, you know, there is some discernment, right? So it's not that there's any type of I am abandoning or I am choosing, you know, I'm saying that you are less than, and I do think that I see a lot of duality and hierarchical reality. I'm not coming from that place at all. I don't see it that way, but I am saying, like, okay, enough is enough for me, because I have attempted to do this multiple times, and again, every time I do, it's that tar baby energy. So yeah, you know, I do respect, and I do understand the reality of that judgment paradox. And yes, sometimes I think it can be flipped on its head and kind of go, everybody kind of, whoever's involved can sort of go, oh yeah, come on, you know, let's get it together. And then there's times where people just drag in their heels more, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that next year or next lifetime or whatever that we're not, in fact, we probably will come back together to have to gain more clarity. But then also, where is the line of saying, okay, I've tried. I've tried multiple times to be seen with the truth of myself as I'm trying to see your truth. And also, you know, there's just seems to be a lashing out over and over again. Thank you.
Yeah. And just to if those needs and requests of, I don't like you, I'm requesting that you leave, or I'm demanding that you leave, if that's the underlying energy in that dynamic, then it would be like I would be bumping up against free will to keep coming or fighting against that underlying energy. So to honor that and to either remove myself from the situation or suggest a way, if it's a shared dynamic, shared spaces do make it more challenging, but it can be discussed. If it's discussed openly, that can be navigated with much more ease. Sometimes that's not even wanted to be talked about, because a lot of the ways that sort of energy manifests, it's very sneaky, you know. Again, I would rather avoid judgmental terms, but it's that there's a reason why that energy is described as the darkness, because it hides in the shadow. It doesn't like coming to the light. When it comes to the light, all of these things can be resolved and are worked through, because, as you said, that is a much more powerful force. So the darkness relies on staying hidden. And if the individual is still working with that energy and still choosing to stay hidden, then what else do you do with it, except for just stepping away and say, okay, well, I don't want to engage with that energy. I'd prefer to stay in the light. I'd invite you to step into the light and into that space of transparency and honesty, if you'd like to, whenever you're ready. But if you're not ready, that I also honor your free will to say you're not ready for this. And those two energies are not going to jive together. They're diametrically opposed. So then there becomes, you know, of course, like nuances with group dynamics and things of that nature, but sometimes the appropriate response is to say, okay, well, this is just not a fit right now. And doesn't mean, like Lila said, it doesn't mean it can't change in a moment. It doesn't mean it can't change whenever, but it's not fair for me to continue trying to force somebody to change to fit the level of transparency and authenticity that I need, and vice versa. If somebody, no matter what I do, chooses to maintain that sense of dislike or desire to have me leave, then it's not fair for me to insist anything otherwise. It's just the honest expression. And even if it isn't willing to be honestly expressed, we can be wise and mature enough based on experiences and seeing the continued behavior to recognize that is the underlying need. That is the underlying request, is to just a refusal, a flat out refusal, and a desire to stay disconnected for whatever reason. So we honor that request in whatever way we need to, and move forward with that. So yeah, it's a tricky situation for sure. But you know, I know it's no accident that we've been through things like this I know, just speaking for myself, just to learn how to better navigate those tricky situations when they come up, and yeah, not lose my sense or my standing based on how somebody else, and own my own feelings, own my own experience with it, but also move freely without worry about how that's going to appear either. Like, us moving freely into or out of relationships or spaces is always our free will to do, no matter what. And it's, if somebody wants to interpret that as punishing or judgmental or anything in that capacity, then that's for anybody else to own as well. It's not my responsibility to do that. So yeah, but I do appreciate the dialogue here. I would say that I do have to bring this to a close. I've got a couple songs to share, so I'll just give a chance if anyone wants to have any closing comments on the topic or on anything else before we start wrapping up today.
Yeah, I just want to hear about the just quickly the giraffe as an archetype in the teaching. Couldn't imagine that anyone wouldn't want to hang out with it. You know, it has that life-giving lens. Like it would. So it's like, how can I meet my need for companionship in this? Or, can I ask them directly? Could I invite someone else, or could I nurture myself in another way? It's and then, like, if someone's not talking directly to us, it's that opportunity to get a direct response of which way to go. Always maintaining that sense of life-giving sort of giraffe consciousness, avoiding that sort of view of not being worthy of that. It's a difficult thing to do. It's just an archetype, but it's really tough. But thanks so much for being involved, and love to everyone.
You until you know thyself and deeply love yourself, you aren't in that draft space, or maybe on and off, right? But to varying degrees. But that, for me, it feels like a really big problem within the communities that I'm traversing right now, that there's a lot of projection, there's a lot of fear of negativity, quote unquote. There's a lot of spiritual bypassing. There's a lot of absence of really looking deeply, and no, I mean, when we say where we go one, we go all, that we are aspects of each other, right? And so this like reality of just not loving oneself, or making it a duality or a hierarchy. Oh, she thinks she's better than me, or this, that, or the other. Welcome to my life. Like, I feel like my entire life has been like rocks thrown at my eye when I'm just sitting there playing in the sand with somebody, and I just like, hey, like, I just came here to play with you. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but it's been a really big challenge. And so I guess in parting, I would just remind everybody that you are giraffes. Like, you can be you. That is the positive part of your internal selves, and nobody can give that to you. And just let's move beyond this duality of hierarchy and just all of this. I'm so excited for that place, so we can really do what we're meant to be doing here. Thank you. And thanks for the conversation. It's really been lovely. And I mean, we just keep showing up and working on it as best we can. And I'm totally willing to do that from my giraffe heart.
Awesome. Yeah, that's the Christic nature, is just the willingness to show up, and through all actions, it's desire to connect. The Christ is about connection. And so whatever avenue presents itself to bring us into that connection is a worthy cause. Absolutely. And sometimes the efforts of disconnection sometimes have to be confronted in ways to that might not be as palatable or fit within exactly within the NVC model, and that's okay too, because it's all truly about the nature of coming back, connecting, whether we're ready to in this moment, or we're ready to based on these catalysts or these experiences or this timeline or whatever. It's all about that. So yeah, I appreciate this conversation very much so, and thanks to all who have participated. And yeah, the show today was phenomenal. I will stitch the two parts together, and yeah, we're going to play out 2 more Regina Spektor songs as we close out today. So I just wanted to, while we have a moment, go over the lyrics for those. She sings in kind of like almost like a silly way at times, but it's very it's very potent what she sings about. So the song On the Radio, the first one I'll play. So the radio is us tuning into that radio station, connecting that dial to divine consciousness, allowing that pure frequency to flow through us. Or, we can connect to other frequencies as well that are more discordant, and the choice is ours in every moment, and none of us get it all right all the time, but it's just that effort of connecting to that right divine frequency. So this is how it works. It feels a little worse than when we drove our hearse right through the screaming crowd, while laughing up a storm until we were just bone, until it got so warm that none of us could sleep, and all the styrofoam began to melt away. So I see this as kind of like the falling experience into the physicality. I mean, she might be telling a funny story as well, but there do seem to be, potential at least for those higher elements. We tried to find some worms to aid in the decay, so coming into the physicality and the death cycle, but none of them were home. Inside the catacomb, a million ancient bees began to sting our knees, while we were on our knees, praying that disease would leave the ones we love and never come again. So just a poetic way I see of describing the angelic fall, the fall from grace into the physical experience and into the realm of pain and suffering and death, but also beauty and discovery and wonderment and all the wonderful sensations that come from it and all the painful sensations that come from it as well. So on the radio, we heard November Rain. That solo is really long, but it's a pretty song. So it's like tapping back into that divine radio station. The November, Nov is 9. So the 9, rain. It's also in the fall. So it could be looked at that way. I see it as just a connecting back to the divine frequency, because the DJ we listened to it twice because the DJ was asleep, as in we were in the stillness and silence. Perhaps. This is how it works. You're young until you're not. You love until you don't. You try until you can't. You laugh until you cry. You cry until you laugh. And everyone must breathe until their dying breath. So the full spectrum of experience and emotions and expressions and how this all moves and shifts through all of it. It's all beautiful. It's all purposeful. Now, this is how it works. You peer inside yourself. You take the things you like and try to love the things you took. And then you take the love that you made and stick it into someone else's heart, pumping someone else's blood and walking arm in arm. You hope it don't get harmed. But even if it does, you just do it all again. So the love story that we're all in, falling away from ourselves and then falling back in love again. And on the radio, you'll hear November Rain. That solo is awful wrong, but it's a good refrain. You listen to it twice because the DJ is asleep on the radio. And it repeats from there. So it's either referring to a divine frequency or not so. Either way, it's all divine. It's all you. So it's all just part of it. So anyway, that's that song on the radio. And then the next one is Apres Moi. And I must go on standing. You can't break that which isn't yours. I must go on standing. It's not my own. It's not my choice. So must go on standing as in standing up against the fallen nature and the destruction and standing firm. I must go on standing. It's not my own. It's not my choice, as in we have relinquished our choice to dedicate our whole self to the Christ. But this is kind of, kind of like apocalyptic or major shifting song. Be afraid of the lame, they'll inherit your legs. Be afraid of the old, they'll inherit your soul. Be afraid of the cold, they'll inherit your blood. Apres moi lo deluge. After me comes the flood. So it's taking lines from the Sermon on the Mount, inserting fear within it, maybe sung from the perspective of those who are fear-driven or afraid of the Christ, because after me comes the flood, the cleansing, clearing, the starting over. And this can be expressed physically, but it can also just be represented internally through the process of transformation. I must go on standing. You can't break that which isn't yours. I must go on standing. I'm not my own. It's not my choice. Yeah, then it repeats from there again. And so, yeah, I see it as the Christic return. Must go on standing. The Christ continues to stand because it's fully connected to that divine nature. So yeah, that's that song. So we'll play these two as we play out. So again, thank you all for being here today, for participating, for jumping in, sharing as you did, and hope everyone has a wonderful day wherever you are. And yeah, we'll see you on the live stream. No watch party this week. I'll be busy with the event, but we'll see you on Sunday for the live stream if you want to join us there. And then we'll see you next time, either which way. So take care, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful day.